Parish. I'm quite a prolific author on sacred bells and strings from all over the UK.
Yeah.
I think he's got 10 books out. Not intimidated at all. And Ross is going to talk to you the traditions and customs of healing wells of Scotland, and then following Ross, we'll have a wee 10-minute chat about sacred well protection stuff. And then Amanda is going to come and tell the most Scottish story you've probably ever heard about a well.
Well, thanks very much, Scott. Thanks very much for inviting me. Thanks very much for coming to hear me speak. I do apologise that with the name Ross, you probably thought I was the most Scottish one here today, but I'm not. I've come all the way from Nottingham. I start off with that slide, so there's a bit of an audience participation here. There's a little bit of a quiz there that hopefully halfway through I'll give you the answer. I'll just remind you about the slide over there. If you don't feel as if you want to ask questions now, or if you think about something later, I'll keep that open for the entire month. So if you do come up to something, please do use that. It's quite easy to use. Right, okay, here's some books of mine. About me, how did I get into this? I'm a teacher, so I will be setting homework. So I researched in the 1980s, which some of you might be thinking I'm quite precocious, and probably I am. I started looking at publishing some of the stuff I've looked at, mainly field work, when related to the stories and legends and folklore and traditions with the sites in all those different counties. I'm slowly working through England, which I also must apologise, but I do have a keen interest in Scotland as well, and Scotland is very underreported in this subject. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. I've written a number of articles, do a number of blogs, one of them is at the end. I also do a blog on traditional customs and ceremonies as well, which is another interest of mine. And I've been researching rag wells, or clootie wells, which is the appropriate. Usually, I turn up one of these things and someone says the word clootie well, and I get a little bit anxious. Because south of where we are here, you shouldn't be using that term. And so I've been doing a bit about that, and I'm ongoing on that. And there's some of the other English counties I've been researching. So, where do we look? Well, these are the three best books for this. I thought I'd start with this really because I want to encourage you to get out there and start reading about this subject. That's probably the earliest one there, which is the Folklore of Locks and Springs. This one, Scottish Healing Wells, you can get a copy. It's a fantastic book. We've got a more recent one here on the Highlands and the islands, and chapters with healing wells as well. But there's some other books as well that come out, which are sort of monograms in different places, Glasgow, whatever. The last two are only available online. And the other one's a bit of a picture book, but it's a great book. So, I say that's the next one. That's the next one I think you should buy. And that one, if you fancy going up to the Western Isles, is a good read. Right. Okay. So, how many holy wells are there in Scotland? And I use the word holy well in a very broad sense in this because we are talking about healing wells in general. There are, in that book by Morris and Morris, there are 1,067 recorded. With another 79 in the other book, because they never touch the islands. But what are holy wells? Well, you want to ask yourself a question. So, through this, hopefully you got an idea. Now, I thought I'd do an A to Z of different traditions and different customs associated with holy wells. For two reasons. One is, you'll know when I've finished. And B, you can know how far I am through it. If I need to speed up, you can tell me, can't you? So there's a lot to cover, so some of them are more tenuous, shall we say, than others, but I think it was a bit of fun. So, animals. Animals, interestingly enough, have traditions associated with wells. If you'd gone to the Holy Well at Kirkhill, you could have cured your cattle there. And what they would have done, once they cured your cattle, you would have left the harness of your cattle on a tree. Now, we talked earlier about clootie wells. Animals also involved with that. And there were some places, the Slot Well at Butel, there was an example where you'd have colic, which was a lung problem that cattle had. And again, the trees would be festooned with bits of harness and the stuff that the animals may have had with them when they brought to the place as thanks to the deities or whatever they believed was at the well. You've got to be careful with animals because if you do take your animals to some wells, you do have a problem. There was one at Taibhsear, where a lady took a horse with a squint. I'm not sure what a horse with a squint looks like. A horse with a squint to a well, and the well lost its power. There was also another case where this well, which was particularly good if you were on your deathbed and it got you through, as it were. If you had a cow urinate anywhere near it, the spring would move. I don't know how many times, but the spring did move. So, leads on to B, Beltane. the most commonest time of year to visit wells in Scotland. There is at least 30 different wells have significance on Beltane, whether that be the Beltane is in the way we see it, which is the 30th of April, or the first Sunday in May, or days around that. I could spend the whole of this talk talking about Beltane and its significance. I haven't got time. But this one here is the St Mary's Well, which is mentioned a number of times in old records, where people would visit on the first Sunday in May to drink the cream of the well, and I'll talk about what the cream of the well is in a moment, and throw a pin or a piece of money into that well to get some sort of wish or hope from that. And it's recorded in the Bankfoot Holy Well that so deep-rooted is this superstition in the minds of many who reckon themselves good Protestants that they will not neglect these rites even when Beltane falls on a Sunday. Ooh. There we go. So there we are. So still very popular, and still today, if you visit some of these sites on the first Sunday in May, there will be people who remember those dates. Odd one coming up next, cheese.
Excellent.
Cheese. This is the cheese well at Mitchmore in near Peebles. And this one, you can see, has no cheese on it. People leave money on the stone by the well now. And the idea was that you placated the fairies by leaving cheese, and they allowed you to have a safe journey through the moorland. Now, what's very interesting here, of course, is that at certain sites, particularly bogs, they've found preserved butter and cheese that may date back to Bronze Age periods, which were given as a sacrifice to the deities of the bog. So it's interesting how this has continued into fairly recent times, certainly to be recorded in the Victorian period, but no one leaves cheese anymore. I suppose you would carry cheese with you, do you? John Pitt. Now, if you suffer with deafness, you can go to this way. This is the Crag Hoe Holy Well, and you get in that rather small hole there, which is not much of a cave, is it? And you get yourself lying down with obviously the ear that had the ear problem, lay down, and let drops of water enter your ear, and you'd be cured. One of the ministers of the local church said, well, it's got to do with the coldness of the water, so he spoke the fun of it straight away. But that well's still there. If you want to try it out, you can try it out. Some wells have different properties, and they are significant in these properties. And ebbing and flowing was one particular property. It's found right across the world. Understandably, water levels drop and rise for various reasons. Often, like this one, we're actually by the sea. In a sense of traditions, in a well, Taibhsear in Inverleithy, the ebbing and flowing was associated with the lairds and how successful they would be. Because if it dropped, one of the lairds would die and so forth. And that's quite a common folk motive, not just in Scotland, but across parts of Britain as well. Fishing is an interesting thing, because in some of the remote communities, particularly on the Western Islands, and in particular where this well is here in Iona, local people would visit these springs to give them hope that they would have good catches. But this particular one's very interesting because the local herring girls, they would visit this on regular occasions, and if they weren't planning to get married within that year, they and their partner would then betroth each other across the well. On Barra, there was one where the fishermen directly would go in there and wish for a good catch. So on particular islands, wells and springs associated with good catches and other aspects became something to remember, and this site's still there. Good luck. Now, interesting, good luck is the first thing most people think about wells, aren't they? Wishing wells. And there's always been an argument within academics in this field that holy wells, once holy wells ceased to be holy, around about the time of the Reformation, they then became wishing wells. Interesting enough, there's not a great deal of evidence on that. Not as many wishing wells as you'd think. This one is Carell's well, St Carell's well at Cregan, and this one it said, if you had a strong desire for something, till then unattainable, you had to go and drink at the well and be sure the wish was granted. Now, I'm not sure how far that goes. If you want to try it, you can do, but anything unattainable is you could get. So that's quite a big ask, isn't it? But what's interesting for this one, it was very popular, even post-Reformation, and the church used to make a lot of money out of this site. The people who need money, which then they would collect and use for good purposes. Obviously, you're all thinking healing. That's the first thing that comes to mind if you think about holy or healing wells. Eyes is probably one of the top reasons you'd visit. If you wanted to visit them, I would suggest St Wallach's Well in Aberdeenshire. Rheumatism is a big issue. and a lot of rheumatism was linked to the coldness of the water curing it. Our Lady's Well at Whitekirk would have been a good place for that. This one here, Scrofula. Now Scrofula is an interesting one because it covered a lot of different things. But one of the things you used to do traditionally, you'd be touched for the king's illness, was another name for it. And this particular well at Livingston, you could use it, but this is why I don't think it could have worked. You'd have to have it sprinkled on you by the sovereign's own hand before the sunrise of the first day of the year. I'm not seeing the Queen getting up and going up and doing that. So it's interesting how that one had that particular restriction on its cure. Rickets was particularly common, unfortunately, and lots of wells were associated with rickets. Inverness, the general dog, was a particularly strong one. And then we had whooping cough. Some wells are called the whooping cough well, very common. One particular, St Mary's Alton, which had a longer tradition as a Catholic pilgrim site, was very much associated with whooping cough. But there's a whole list. Scurvy, jaundice, obstructions, leprosy, which again covered a wide area of different skin diseases, consumption, epilepsy, sprains, broken limbs, skin disease, warts, one I'll come on to in a minute, toothache, ague, lameness. But there were also wells, and this shows how forward-thinking some people were in those days, for cancer, for piles, for cough, paralysis, melancholy, baldness. And I spoke to a lady up in the Highlands a few years ago. She said there was a well MS, which obviously is something more recently diagnosed. So it's interesting how traditions are shifting. This well here, St Fumac's well, and he again had a fair on the 3rd of May, and there was an idol. And this idol they carried around the village on the fair day, and they would ceremoniously bathe it in the spring water. And often when they were bathed in the spring water, the water then became more powerful and more efficacious. Unfortunately, with this particular effigy, there was a flood right about the day they were doing it, and the flood let the carving drift down the river, and it ended up in Banff, where the local minister thought of it as idolatrous, and then decided to burn it, and there ended any use of said idol, unfortunately. Whether or not the church have thought maybe another one, I don't know. But in Ireland there are still churches that do this. It's a sad thing. Now, one of the things you could do is do the rounds. There's a term in Ireland called patterns. It's not a term that's familiar in Scotland. But you'd have a certain way you'd go round. I'm sure some of you might be able to tell which way it is. Which way is it? Sunrise, yes, so the way in which the sun goes round, okay? Before we obviously we call it now clockwise, wouldn't we? In the days before the clocks, we call it diesel, wouldn't we? To go round the way the sun. Diesel, I never know what it is.
Pronunciation in Gaelic.
Oh, yeah, thank you. I was going to say that, my Gaelic pronunciations, please insert here for any pronunciation I do wrong. This particular well, which is Finfillian's well, you'd visit on the 1st of May again, or the 1st of August, which is Lammas-tide, and you'd go around that certain way. Now, if you were particularly disabled, you would take a white stone, you'd place it on the saint's cairn, or if you had rheumatism, you'd climb up to the saint's chair, and there hope to get a wish. Now, when I was at the Clutie well in Inverness, we had a mention of that earlier, the Clutie well in Inverness, I'll show you some more pictures in a minute. I did witness people going in that way around the well, still doing it. And they weren't people who were in the know, as I would say, they were actually local people who did it. I took a look when they did that, I know. So it still goes on. Now, this is an interesting one. Unfortunately, no pictures of this. This is the marriage well, and the marriage well is in Shettleston. And this, I think, is still here. I've yet to trace exactly where it is at the moment to find, but I think it might be left. But married parties used to visit it on the day of their marriage, and then drink draughts of it, sort of to sanctify the marriage. And it's recorded in 1930 that shy bridesmaids and their groomsmen used to visit after a wedding to drink the mystic waters of the marriage well. Certain places about the woods were well adapted for picnics. After tea and refreshment, the lads and lasses passed hours in amusement trying to step over the well, and anyone soiling the well in any way while stepping across it would not get married during the year, because obviously this is the bridal party, which is not the bridal. So, that's an interesting one. Madness. Madness is quite commonly cured in a number of wells across Britain, and some very well-known wells associated with madness. This one is St Maruchas well, it's in the Highlands, and you had a special thing you had to do. It was on an island. You'd have to row your child, I think it was a child, something like that. You'd row them out to the island, you'd immerse them in the well, so you put them in that well, which I believe now is dry. You tie them to the boat, and you'd go, how many times around the island? 3, good. 3 times around the island. Okay, you go 3 times around the island, and hopefully you'd be cured. By this particular well, there was a tree, and the tree had all coins nailed into it, left as votive offerings. Votive offerings I'll talk about in a moment. And Queen Victoria visited this said well, in fact, and read into that what you want, and she did leave it. Another one.
Excuse me, did they tie them outside the boat or inside the boat?
I believe it was inside the boat.
Oh, good.
I believe it's The records aren't clear. The records aren't clear, but they did do some horrible things, as you'll see in the next one. Another place you go to is another St. Filian's Holy Pool. And here, you yourself would dive down to the bottom of the pool and remove 3 stones. And those 3 stones you put on 3 different cairns. Then you'd be stripped naked, and you'd be dragged to the local church, where you'd either be tied to the altar, to the tomb of the saint, or, slightly more comfortable, a pillar with straw attached. Then you'd have a bell either put on your chest, that's obviously if you're on the tomb or the altar, or hung above your head, and you were left there locked up till the morning. If you managed to get free, you'd be on your way to a cure. Not cured, on your way to a cure. Unfortunately, if you think of trying this, it no longer works because at one point a wild bull was thrown into the water and then basically lost its power. New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve, obviously your New Year's Eve is different from England's New Year's Eve. Interestingly enough, England's New Year's Eve adopted many of the customs, and one of those particular is going to take the cream of the well, and the cream of the well is the first bubbling of that well in the new year. So you can see where the potential with Beltane and May Day comes, isn't it? But obviously between Beltane and May Day you've got suddenly the melting of the ice cubes making the water clearer and cleaner. So here, potentially you've got the same thing. So people used to rush to get the cream of the well. Another term you might see is the flower of the well. Because what you had to do when you got there, to prove you'd been there, you'd leave flowers on the surface of the water. That obviously, at some point, that's probably a traditional giving and gift, an offering to the deities and spirits of the well. But in later times, it's evidence that you've been there. Why would you do it? Well, I wish I'd used it myself because I had to get up here from Nottingham and I cancelled the trains. And one of the things it gives you is an ability to fly. And go through keyholes. Good fairy Pokemon. Oh, there we are, look at that. What's out the top there? Suddenly appearing. Right. So this is the Craigie well, at Och, perhaps that one correctly, which is on the Black Arm. And here you could visit it. In this case, they've left a clue to you there. But one of the things you could visit it is to have a prophecy from an oracle. And the oracle was in the spring, and you put 2 pieces of straw, and the straw would swirl around like that. Now, if it swirled around opposite directions, it meant you recovered. If it didn't do anything, that meant you were going to die. At another well at Rhodey, you visit at sunrise, and if it was blue, the water was blue, again, unfortunately, you were going to die. At Kepop Well and Leys Castle, a bit more detail this, you've got a piece of wood, and on that piece of wood you put a stone, and you place it at the bottom of the well. You give it a little bit of time. And if it bobbed up, okay, the prognosis would be, you live. If it stayed at the bottom of the well, you die. A stone on a bit of wood, that doesn't sound like good odds to me, but there we go. But it also allowed you to, this same well allowed you to work out if someone was telling you the truth. You take a pin, you drop the pin into the water, and if the pin dropped pin down, as it were, that was good. That was all right. There was no lies involved. If it went the other way up, head down, the person was lying and they were guilty. So these traditions were recorded around about the turn of the 20th century. So again, interesting use, particular ideas behind prophecy and oracle. Right, pilgrimage. Obviously, wells all over the world are still visited as pilgrimage. These are 2 that were up until quite recently. Got some Stowe, and so Mary's Well at Stowe, which is the bigger one. which I think was recently visited until the noughties. I'm not sure if he still does get visited. And then we've got some area as well at Orton, which was a major Catholic site. In fact, it's designed so there's a huge green area in front of these loads of people can congregate. But again, that died out in the turn of the last century, revived a bit, and I think it's gone back up. There's a site not visited by organised people. Here we are, Rags, Cluties, there they are. So this is the Clutie well at Milwaukee, which me and Inverness, and that's actually the well itself. And I've done quite a bit on this. I've plotted every single one of these across the globe if I can find them. Scotland, of course, is a bit of stronghold. There's 28 sites in Scotland, which 6 of them are still existing. So 6 sites that still people visit traditionally and leave clues. Now some of those, there's evidence that those wells have been visited by people locally. Some of them, they might be visited by people bringing their own traditions. And you can see with this, these are cloths. They're really unusual here, but around the site there's everything you could ever imagine tied to trees. But unfortunately, very difficult to date. First date of this, 1600, which is in England, in Cleveland. Quartz. Quartz is something that was left at lots of wells. In Alloway's Mungo's well, it was cleared in 1928. The whole thing was full of quartz, and quartz was a common offering to wells. And still quartz appears in wells by people who know to bring quartz to them. Skulls. There's a lot, I'm not going to go into that, I could do a whole talk on skulls and wells, I'm sure those who know something about wells will know that. At St Marnock's well, at Marnock, they had an interesting association with skulls. They would take the saint's skull, this isn't it though, there's just a picture of the skull, the saint's skull has been lost. And they would wash it every Sunday in the spring water and return it back to the reliquary. But on the 18th of August it had a special power, and the water that dripped off the well would be collected and would be given to people for healing purposes. Now similar to that, toothache, I mentioned toothache earlier. Toothache is a very common problem, but very uncommonly found in holy wells or healing wells. Scotland seems to have quite a strong connection with toothache. I don't know why, you might be able to tell me that. Because I found quite a lot of wells to do with toothache. One in Rossum Cromarty, the Red Well, it cured toothache and also gave you the appetite, but you had to turn up there in silence. There were certain traditions, certain checks too. On Lewis, you'd visit a certain well and you'd take 7 mouthfuls of water, you'd squirt out 6 of those mouthfuls onto a certain rock and swallow the 7th. And hopefully that would give you some ease of your toothache. And at other places on the Western Isles, you'd have to go there and give a little recitation. Here I leave the toothache, the pain almost wasting my head, the well never dry in the name of the Father, the Son and the Holy Ghost. So certain traditions associated with toothache, particularly the further north into the Highlands of the Western Isles. So this is a bit of a cop-out, this one, it's unusual to cover anything else I couldn't get in there. There was a well called the Lucky Well at Bethag, and the Lucky Well was covered in stones. You had to climb at a certain time of day, usually in the late evening. You'd remove every single well, and you'd take a small wooden spoon, and you'd throw the water in a certain way over your shoulder. Why did you do that? It was to control the wind. And then once you've done that, you put all the stones back again. And of course, unfortunately, because people traditionally used to do this, you never talk about where it was, the site's been lost. At St Medonsworth, Kirk Maiden, there were 3 wells there, and there was quite a complicated. You talk about immersing people in water. You take your children again in May, and you'd hold the child and fully immerse them in the first well, and then you take the second one and just do the leg, and then fortunately the last one you just take it and put the eyes out like that, and then you'd leave ritually money at the end. Other ones, an interesting one, that one we saw earlier, that's at Mary's well at 5e. You'd go to that, drink the well, leave money, but then you also visit a stone. And that stone was called the Shagger Stone, which I believe is an old word for, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's for a sickly child, and you'd go and visit that. Quite often, you'd have a situation where you'd visit the well, and you'd visit some form of stone circle or standing stone. There we are. So, what's the odd one out? What's the odd one out? Chris, no.
Danny.
No. It's the pin. Because the pin is one of the traditional things you left at a well. You don't find any pins anywhere anymore. You find all of those. I don't mean litter crisp packets, I mean crisp packets tied to trees. And that's a work thing tied to a tree, as David's telling me. So votive offerings, just very quickly on this, votive offerings is particularly interesting because I've done quite a bit of research on votive offerings that are recorded in an old document. I won't say much more about it, but look at the numbers. There's something here that an Englishman could say, but I don't want to get in trouble. Just look here. I don't want to leave you with anything like that. So, why leave votive offerings? Obviously, there's various reasons behind that. Some was to give thanks, some was in the hope of some sort of thing to be given by the well or the spring. Other reasons, sometimes there's a development of tokenism there, leaving something saying you should be there. We had a little mention of witches. Witches associated with some wells. You've got Holy Trinity Well at Trinity Gas, where you could get your witchcraft, your curses taken off you if you visited it on Trinity Sunday. Obviously, the interesting thing about all these is that the church wasn't very keen on people visiting wells. That's a benefit for people like me, because the church, the kirk, did huge amounts of records about people who would be prohibited from going to the one that had a little cross in the name in the register. And quite often you hear different accounts. So in Hunting Tower, there's a well there, so it's a Cornwall's well, and they say of that, of these women that visited it in 1618, 16 women walked to the session of the court, and they said, that they drink thereof, and each of them leave a pin thereat. And there were which are the points of oratory in putting the well in God's room. Now, St. Jargon's well, St. Quirian's well, Taibhsear, which is on the other side, in Dumfries and Galloway. Dorothy Hayes and Marion Harrison, on the first Sunday in May, they visited and superstitious went to fetch the water, and then they had to, then as a result of that, stand up in church and say they'd done it. So that's interesting in a sense, and that was quite a common punishment to stand up and be outcast within the community. So it's X, we're not getting far. How are we doing for time? That's a spin wrap.
I don't know.
Good, right, okay. Because we're near the end there, see, aren't we? Right. So, why? This is the Well of Youth in Iona, which is quite an interesting, in a very prominent position in Iona. You've got to climb up to it. And if you climb up to it and bathe one's face, either at sunset or again at Beltane, your youth would be preserved. So, I'm booking a flight up there later. There was another well called the Everlasting Well. If you drank of that well, you would be everlasting, you'd live forever. You know what I'm going to say next, don't you? You can't find it because you have to be told by someone who's visited it. They're not going to tell you on that. That one's lost. If you do any of that, let me know. So, Zed. We talked about sleeping earlier, and sleeping is quite an important thing to do at wells, often with children. And at the Claggett Well, you take a sickly child and you place that sickly child, he or she, between two stones at the edge of the well at Beltane Eve, and then you'd watch over them through the night, and then when the sun arose in the morning, you take the child and you dip them in the well. I'm sure they would really like you do that. But you dip them and got a loose sprinkle water on them. In Inverness, there's a well called the Well of the Spotted Rock, and that was quite an interesting well there, because this is one of the wells where if you had a concern that your child was a changeling, was obviously a fairy, you could take your child to the place, again, leave it overnight with a bowl of milk, and in the morning you would have your baby replaced with a fresh and non-fairy baby. So that's it in the sense of my whistle-stop tour of well traditions in Scotland. But if you are interested in wells, please do make contact. I'm still continuing my survey, and that's a QR code for those who are in the know. You can put your phone up to that and click onto it if you've got a QR reader. But I'm still doing my survey on votive offerings across Britain, which I started about 2 years ago, which much of my research on rag wells comes from. And this is people who visit wells recording sites that aren't recorded elsewhere, or rag wells, or that they record what they do themselves. So there's a whole thing there. And again, you can also follow me on my different blogs. We've had some traditional customs, folklore, or on the Holy Well one. And you notice I put 2 Scottish ones on there to suggest that I actually just talk about Scotland. So if you don't mind a few English things in there, please do follow me. Okay? And that's it. Thanks very much for listening.
Does anybody have any questions for Ross at all?
Go on then.
Which was the well with the rocks and the spoon?
Rocks and the Spoon. That is, I'll tell you. I forgot my name. It's with T. It's at is it Tarbert? Is that some Tarbert? I could say Tarbert. Yeah, Tarbert. I don't remember my hand on it. It's an interesting one, that, isn't it? And it's one that bring up the. I mean, down south, as in England, there are springs associated with rising winds for shipwrecking and so forth. There's one at St. Juan as well on the old Sicily, where people used to whip up the wings and get shipwrecked. So I wonder if it's a link with that. It's an interesting one, isn't it?
I'm talking about St. Carolswell.
Carolswell, yeah.
Yeah, that's just been Chronicle from DSD.
Ah, right.
And there's another 2 wells
Oh, there's loads, yeah.
down that loch.
Yeah.
Anyway. One's Ida and one's Anita.
Ah.
But they're all about the same height up.
Hmm.
And you think there's something about it's almost like a pilgrimage going up.
Oh, yeah, almost certainly.
Because the one that's in Carol, they've got the old graveyard up from it.
Up
And
top, yeah.
then
I think there's a couple of things there. I think there's an association with possibly prehistoric sites being on higher prominent places, and that's why they're there. Certainly, if you're not making some sort of effort to get there, it makes the whole thing less valuable when you get there, isn't it? If it's just on the corner of the street in Edinburgh, it's part of the problem. You know, wherever your background on the word pilgrimage, we all do a pilgrimage, whether we're religious or not, don't we? We all make an effort to go somewhere. And you feel the places you make an effort to go to are the better ones because they're further away, aren't they?
I think probably if you're prepared to walk all the way up, then the chances of, if it's a healing well, your chances of survival are so much stronger because you're more inclined to survive as it is. Is what my
I mean, the classic one like that is Patrick's Purgatory, isn't it, in Ireland, where you've got a series of stations where you have to climb the mountain and there's a spring and there's all different things. I mean, if you don't survive that, you're not going to survive anything. And similarly, I think there's a tradition obviously with Arthur's Seat, isn't there? In the guys of the May during Arthur's Seat and reaching that. And there's a loop there somewhere along with the Green Lodge as well. So quite a nice park.
You believe in yourself?
Can you just explain the cream of the well again?
The cream of the well? The cream.
The water first returns.
Yeah, I mean, the idea, I look at it from a scientific point of view, I put here really. The idea that, obviously at the beginning of the year, the water will be purer because you've had meltwater drain into it. Or you've had the purity of the water coming. I mean, obviously, sprinkling underground is a constant thing. Some places they're not as bad. Sometimes they are affected by water supply. The idea then being flushed out by the rains or the snow at the beginning of the year would mean anything that would be in there that might not be wanted, like a cow's urine or something like that, would be removed. The idea about it is an interesting one because there's different takes on it where you go. And what's particularly interesting, although New Year, as in Hogmanay New Year, is a Scottish structure, you find more of things down south. Particularly in Herefordshire, I mean, that's fairly down south, for traditions of that nature. And then there's local records of people racing to the well with buckets and bringing it back. What surprises me about that as a tradition, there are no surviving examples. Which to my mind is quite, because you think, a few drunk people out on a night out think I'll get to the well first one. I can see it having a bit of fun aspect to it. Or a big fight. Or a big fight, whatever. Both of which, both popular at New Year, of course.
It's been a heavy night.
It's a cheese bowl, yeah.
So I had a question as well.
Yeah,
I was wondering, is it for the chart they did?
Yeah.
Actually,
which one is
had
this one?
done obviously maybe of Ireland.
I knew that.
Because also Scotland and Ireland's history and culture it goes back to a way. I thought that would be,
Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because when I put this together, you can see that it's rags, isn't it? I was only interested in rag wars. So my first research was rag war, and I thought, I'm reading all these documents and I'm reading all these books, why am I not recording other things? So my natural instinct was first to go to England, Scotland and Wales and record those. I never really got to putting all my notes together on Ireland, which there are a number. Ireland's problematic in the sense that you've got a book written in 1835 by someone who hates anything Catholic. And that's really the source book of all this. And it's the first Hardy's name, was Philip Dixon Hardy. And it's actually the first book on holy wells anywhere, written as an academic study. And he talks about this, he uses all the inflammatory language. So it's very difficult when you read to think, is he telling the truth or is he making it up? You don't really then get a book on Irish holy wells until about 1980. In the interim, you've got quite a number of articles, but not every single county in Ireland is on the same focus, as nor has every county in Scotland, every shire in Scotland, or in England, and that is the one. That's why I got involved with it, because if you're not going to record it, you've got to record it somehow.
One last question.
Yeah, it was more a comment. Over in Ireland, I've come across lots of different maps which map holy wells, sacred sites, standing stones, and it's a really beautiful resource that really celebrates this in the culture and makes it accessible to local people, tourists. Is that something that you're able to do for Scotland, with Scotland?
You could do it if you can find it. They're still there. I mean, you saw there's 1,000. You saw there's 1,074 sites. But I think that's something you could work towards. You've got to work. I would say you've got to start with the sites you know about.
Yeah.
And then start moving in different counties and outlets. So that links on neatly what we're going to talk about next.
It does.
Yeah, and it's how it all links up, and also I mean,
that's
exactly what he was saying down there about in Ireland. There's the shared.
Yeah. I mean, we're fortunate to have them record our ordnance survey maps. Even modern ordnance survey maps that are the ones to 25,000, they still have holy wells marked on the springs with names in them. So we're lucky to have that. So it wouldn't be difficult to find. I mean, I do much of my research is book, and then I go out and find them.
Yeah.
And so I go through every stage of the ordnance survey, and I've one early maps to find them. And often they disappear off the 20th century maps at some point, but they're still there. I come across a wonderful site just outside of Wolverhampton, and that's a strange. Seems like a bit of that sort of oxymoron. But it was a beautiful lady dweller, carved into a rock. It came out under a rock with a beautiful yew tree, come into a big basin, and completely not even marked in that. I only found it through an old record and just worked out from the layout what they described very well. So it's quite remarkable. Things can still be there. Some things are recorded, some things are not.
Which I think leads quite
Does
neatly
indeed. Let me get forward with it.
to no, not at all. Actually, I could listen to you for the whole day. It's been absolutely
Really good. Thank you very much.
fascinating. But I'm gonna